a boy. Young men and young women, or men and women, should both do the same thing. You protect yourself.
The four wives often claimed not to notice what Kody was doing for them, but always seemed to notice what he was doing for someone else. There was always this comparison, this underlying tension, and it was slowly killing everything. Other than some muffled cries and the soft rustle of tissues being pulled from boxes, the church was silent. The air was heavy, somber, drenched in sorrow for the untimely death of Robyn Brown. He was too young. His passing followed a private and agonizing fight, one that he endured largely alone, with Christine and Logan by his side toward the very end. In the front pew, high up, Janelle sat in absolute silence. Her grief needed no words. It was written all over her face, carved deep in her expression. Across the aisle sat Mary, pale and unreadable, as though she were present physically, but lost in another world entirely. The older children, Madison, Hunter, Gabriel, McKelty, and Gwendolyn, were scattered around the church, each one withdrawn into their own universe of sorrow, struggling silently with the weight of their loss. Roughly 20 minutes into the auditoire's service, the heavy back doors of the church creaked open, heads swiveled, conversations ceased. And then, in they came. Robyn and Kody Brown, hand in hand, as though making a grand entrance. Dressed in black, they were impossible to miss. Robyn's designer purse caught the light, and Kody's shiny cowboy boots struck the floor with every step. To many, it looked less like a funeral, and more like they were arriving at a red carpet event. They didn't linger by the casket, didn't pause to reflect, didn't offer a moment of contemplation or even a quiet word of comfort to Janelle. No embrace, no acknowledgement. Instead, the firm, echoing click of Robyn's heels cut through the silence as they made their way straight down the center aisle, front and center. And then, without invitation, Kody moved to the pulpit. He wasn't scheduled to speak. Janelle and Logan had carefully planned every aspect of the service, determined to honor Garrison's life in a way that felt true, personal, intimate, and not overly forced or religious. But in typical Kody style, he seized the moment and made it about himself. From his coat pocket, he pulled a crumpled piece of paper. He gazed out at the mourners, his eyes darting nervously between the page and the crowd, before beginning to read. His voice was somber, his tone heavy. Garrison was a complicated young man, he began. One of the toughest things God ever asked me to do was be a dad, particularly through times like these. Slowly, people turned in their seats, listening, but what followed made the air in the church grow tense. We mourn not only the death of our children, Kody continued, but also the death of our influence, our position, and our legacy, when they are confused and allow outside voices to turn their hearts against their own kin. There was a stunned silence. Eyebrows raised. People whispered quietly among themselves, the charged air filled with discomfort. Still, Kody pressed on. We loved him, he said firmly. Even when he pushed us away, even when he rejected our values, our way of living, and the love we tried to give him. Behind him, Robyn suddenly let out a loud, dramatic outburst of sobs. It wasn't the quiet, communal sorrow of the others. It was theatrical, almost melodramatic. She clung to Kody's arm, pressing her tear-streaked face into his sleeve as though she herself were the grieving mother. The children's reactions spoke volumes. Gwendolyn covered her face with her hands, clearly disturbed by what she was hearing. Gabriel sat with his fists clenched in his lap, his head lowered, his eyes heavy with pain. Logan forced himself to stay composed, his jaw tight, the strain visible in the tension of his neck. And then, Janelle rose. Slowly, steadily, she approached the pulpit where Kody still stood, gesturing, speaking, trying to portray himself as the misunderstood father. She stopped in front of him, her voice cold but controlled. You don't get to do this, she said firmly. You don't get to stand here and redefine who you were to him or who he was to you. You weren't there. He died alone, abandoned. And now you're here, talking about your hurt, your pride. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't need to shout. The church was so quiet it felt as though the very air had chilled. You didn't know his pain? She went on, her gaze locked on him. I did. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath. The silence was absolute. Janelle's words landed like a final blow. "Do you want the last word?" she asked, unflinching. "You've already had enough. Sit down." For the first time in years, Kody's face revealed something real. Shock. He froze, utterly paralyzed. Janelle turned without hesitation and returned to her seat. Moments later, the pastor quietly stepped up behind Kody and gently guided him away from the podium. The service continued, but the damage had already been done.
I've heard of weird things like he has a bedroom. See, I would never put up with that. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you signed up for this," just like they tell me.
But this time, Kody had nothing left to say. No witty comebacks, no empty promises, no apologies. His phone went unanswered. One by one, his children had blocked his number. Even Robyn's son Dayton began to confront him with painful questions. "Why did we leave? Why were you always crying? Why didn't you talk to Janelle?" Questions for which Kody had no answers. One morning, as dawn crept slowly into the quiet house, Kody sat alone in the dim kitchen sipping his coffee. The silence upstairs was broken only by Robyn's muffled sobs. He stared down at his phone, rereading the final message he had ever received from Garrison. Just one line. "You made a decision. Don't call me when it's convenient for you." And now, with Garrison gone, there was no one left to call. Meanwhile, life moved forward without them. Janelle drew strength from her children, surrounding herself with their support and love. Christine immersed herself in her grandchildren and her healing journey. Mary, finally free from Kody's shadow, began redefining her own life. The children, though still grieving, leaned on each other and rebuilt their bonds. Together, they found solace in truth and in family. And as for Kody and Robyn, they faded into the background, remnants of a past the rest of the family no longer wanted to preserve. Yet the real conclusion hadn't started with the funeral. That moment simply made the truth impossible to ignore. Behind closed doors at TLC, the backlash was swift and brutal. Executives huddled in hushed, windowless rooms, flipping through binders filled with social media analyses, viewer comments, and raw footage logs. They had weathered scandal before, but this was different. This was a storm they had never anticipated. A sound engineer, unwilling to remain silent, leaked a snippet of Kody's funeral speech. Less than 2 minutes long, the clip spread like wildfire across TikTok and X. Millions watched in disbelief as Robyn wailed theatrically in the background, while Kody accused his late son of straying from family values. The backlash was immediate and unrelenting. Fans who had tolerated Kody's narcissism for years finally hit their limit. Viewers changed the channel. Reality TV veterans demanded that TLC issue a statement. Therapists on YouTube analyzed the family's dysfunction, while influencers dissected the toxic patterns of Kody and Robyn. A new hashtag began trending worldwide: War Protect the Brown Kids. It dominated conversations for weeks. Meanwhile, Janelle, Christine, and their children refused to answer TLC's calls. Their silence was powerful. No interviews, no appearances, not even a whisper. That silence was finally broken when Gwen agreed to a private Zoom call with a producer she trusted. She laid down the ultimatum in clear terms. "We're not doing this if he's part of it. Same goes for Robyn. If this show is going to survive, something has to change." And that became the turning point. By early summer, TLC announced a bold new direction. The show would return under a new name: Freedom. No more focus on one man with multiple wives. Viewers had grown tired of that story. Instead, the series would highlight the women, their independence, their resilience, and the children who had grown up in Kody's shadow. Janelle and Christine agreed to return. Logan, Gwen, Madison, and Mike Kelty also signed on. Even Mary, after long reflection, chose to participate again, but only on her own terms, with her healing as the priority. When the cameras rolled once more, everything felt different. Gone were the staged family gatherings. Gone was the pretense of unity. There were no more scenes of Kody dominating the discussion. This time, the narrative was authentic. The first episode opened with Janelle walking softly through Garrison's now empty home. Her hand brushed against framed photographs on the wall as she whispered, I didn't know how much he was hurting. Her voice trembled but remained open and honest. This story isn't just about polygamy. It's about what happens when silence is used as a tool to control people. From there, the show unfolded into a deeply human story of women who had endured emotional neglect and emerged stronger, happier, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Audiences responded with overwhelming support. Ratings skyrocketed. Viewers had rediscovered something real, something raw, something worth investing in again, but not everyone was celebrating. In Flagstaff, Robyn spent her days sunk into the couch, endlessly replaying the trailer for Freedom on her phone. She wasn't in it. Neither was Kody. Their names were never spoken, their presence erased. For Robyn, that silence was unbearable. In a sudden fit of anger, she snapped her phone shut and hurled it across the room. "We have to speak up," she shouted at Kody. "We have to defend ourselves." But Kody was no longer the man he once was. Distant, tired, and hollow, he barely reacted. He no longer rushed online to defend himself, no longer lashed out at critics. Most days, he sat unwashed and unmoved in the den, a shadow of his former self. So Robyn took matters into her own hands. She pitched the idea of a redemption interview, an hour-long podcast guest appearance, maybe even a special feature where she could share her truth. She believed the world simply misunderstood her, and that if she explained herself clearly, they would finally see her side. The host agreed, framing it as one of the most notorious reality TV scandals of all time. Robyn arrived for the interview dressed in stark white, sitting stiffly under harsh studio lights. Her voice was delicate, almost fragile, as she began. "They made me out to be the bad guy, but I only ever loved Kody. I only ever loved our children." Then came the sentence that changed everything. "They were jealous," Robyn whispered. The host blinked. "Jealous? You mean Janelle and Christine?" Robyn nodded solemnly. "They resented that our house had peace, that my children were more obedient, more submissive. I loved Kody more than they ever did." From there, it spiraled. Clips of Robyn labeling Janelle as bitter, accusing Christine of brainwashing the children, and dismissing Garrison as rebellious went viral. Her words rang hollow, and the backlash was fierce. That same night, Gwen uploaded a reaction video. Her voice shook with restrained anger. "I don't want to keep talking about her," Gwen said, "but I'll say this. Garrison wasn't rebellious. He was hurting. And for Robyn to sit there and act like the victim." She trailed off, her fury obvious. Christine remained silent, speaking only through action. She posted a photo of herself with young Garrison at a campfire, both of them, smiling. The caption read, "To love someone, you have to show up." He had always known who did. Even Mary, usually quiet, broke her silence on social media. She tweeted just one sentence. "Some truths need no defense. I stand with Janelle. I stand with Garrison." Within days, TLC's internal memo was leaked. It stated plainly, "Breaking. Free is not associated with Robyn Brown. There are no future projects in development." It was official. Robyn had been cut out completely. Meanwhile, Freedom thrived. Janelle became a sought-after speaker at women's empowerment conferences. Christine's memoir, The Third Wife, surviving.
For Robyn, that was significant, and in my mind, I wanted to elevate all my relationships to that point. And that
Within a single week, the silence shot onto the bestseller lists. At the same time, Gwen and Logan co-created a podcast called The Truth is a Sister, where they spoke openly about spiritual trauma, authoritarian family systems, and the power of reclaiming one's voice. Their honesty struck a chord with listeners across the country. Meanwhile, Robyn found herself completely shut out. No more interviews, no more invitations, no more sympathy. Her attempt to take back the narrative had failed spectacularly, and the public had lost patience with her. Kody, too, slipped into obscurity. He faded into what could only be described as a vanishing act. No more tirades, no more claims of leadership, no more attempts at justification. He became silent, locked in his own echo chamber of regret. But those who had once been silenced, dismissed, or spoken over, the women and children of the Brown family, they now took center stage. They seized the microphone, they told their truth, and the world not only listened, it leaned in. Yet if there was one constant in Kody Brown's life, it was his determination to avoid the law. Even in the early days of Sister Wives, when rumors swirled about possible prosecutions for polygamy, Kody wanted no risks. Viewers still remember the night he hurriedly packed up his family and left Utah under cover of darkness, afraid of arrest. That fear defined him. Years later, in December, Kody's name reappeared in the headlines, not for spiritual guidance, but for a near brush with jail. A shocking, rough-cut video leaked onto the internet, showing Robyn Brown casually talking about Kody's run-in with the police. Though her tone seemed oddly calm, the situation had been serious. Kody had nearly been arrested. Robyn recounted their relocation, claiming it was for safety. "We just wanted to live as a family without being criminalized." She revisited 2010 when the Browns moved states, believing Utah authorities might prosecute them for polygamy. She described the judgmental stares from neighbors, the gossip, and the feeling of isolation. But as Fox 13 later reported in 2016, no charges had ever been filed. The Lehigh Police Department had never investigated Kody Brown, and the Utah Attorney General's office confirmed that simply living in a plural marriage was not, in itself, a criminal offense. So, was Kody's fear paranoia or self-preservation? Fans debated endlessly. To some, it looked like another dramatization, another attempt to play martyr for the cameras. To others, it was proof that Kody had always exaggerated threats that never truly existed. As one fan bluntly put it, Kody wouldn't have lasted a weekend in prison. Over the years, Sister Wives evolved beyond its original concept of following a polygamous family. What began as a study in faith and love eventually unraveled into a public spectacle of dominance, control, betrayal, and broken vows. Christine broke away first, boldly declaring her independence. Janelle followed with quiet but firm resolve. Even Mary, after years of limbo, finally walked away. For each of them, silence had ceased to be an option. Kody and Robyn, once considered the golden couple of the plural arrangement, were left clinging to a traditional monogamous marriage. The irony wasn't lost on fans. By season 19, the show had shifted completely. It was no longer about weddings or Kody's authority. It was about the children, many of them now adults, scarred but resilient after growing up in such a fractured environment. One of the most redemptive moments came in October 2023 at Christine's wedding to David Woolley in Moab, Utah. It was a bright, joyous celebration, a complete contrast to the years of tension and control. Nearly all of the Brown children attended, standing proudly with Christine, their unwavering supporter. Noticeably absent, of course, were Kody and Robyn. Their absence sent an unspoken but unmistakable message. The future had passed them by. Interestingly, Kody and David had crossed paths a few times at family gatherings. In one particularly shocking moment during Sister Wives, Tell All Part 2, Kody confessed something no one expected. "I like David. He's ridiculously handsome." The comment, awkwardly delivered with a crooked smile, revealed both his fragile ego and his clumsy candor. Fans laughed, cringed, and shook their heads. Still beneath the discomfort, there was truth. Kody was no longer the center of the story. His ex-wives had found peace, love, and purpose beyond him, while he struggled to define himself without them. For Christine and Janelle, real estate became their calling. After years of uncertainty, financial chaos, and constant moves, they turned their hard-earned experience into a mission. They launched a company provisionally called Foundations. But it was more than just a real estate firm. It was a mentorship network. Christine brought warmth, charm, and empathy, while Janelle contributed strategy, analysis, and financial planning. Together, they began hosting workshops for single mothers, divorced women, and even adult children of fundamentalist families. Their goal, to help others reclaim autonomy through home ownership and financial independence. A new empire was forming, one built not on dominance, but on healing and empowerment. Meanwhile, Kody drifted further into irrelevance. Even his proposed guys trip with David never materialized. It was a passing fantasy, a bizarre idea that only underscored how far he had fallen from his once grand vision of control. Christine, Janelle, and Mary had moved on. The children were rebuilding, and Kody Brown was left behind, clinging to memories of a family that no longer wanted him. Christine no longer had time to waste on foolishness. Her wedding had been magical, and now her life overflowed with possibilities. In a special Freedom segment, she was shown standing beside David on the porch of their Utah home, discussing the launch of a family cookbook. It blended classic Brown family recipes with new, healthier twists. "Healing occurs in the kitchen," Christine whispered, her eyes soft as she clasped David's hand. "We nourished each other's souls before ever sitting down to a meal." It was the kind of moment sister wives never allowed. Too raw, too intimate, but Freedom embraced it. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Tata Farms began to flourish. Madison's floral arrangements were gaining traction on Pinterest, and the farm, though modest, quickly became a symbolic destination. Ever the strategist, Janelle had already filed LLC paperwork for event rentals, wedding coordination, and a farm-to-table brunch service. Mary contributed crates of her signature handmade wreaths and centerpieces. At a soft opening event, Janelle stood before a small crowd and declared, "We built this from the ashes, and we're not done." Mary had found her voice too. After years of being cast as bitter and distant, fans now called her the glow-up wife. Her solo trip to England had sparked a travel blog, and her Instagram brimmed with smiling selfies, antique shop visits, and uplifting reflections on resilience. She even began hosting women's retreats at her Utah B&B. The ads promised, "Come for the silence, stay for the fire pit conversations." Guests arrived in droves. Sometimes even Gwen and Logan attended, offering Gen Z and millennial perspectives on healing from toxic spirituality and reclaiming identity. Robyn, however, never recovered her image. The disastrous podcast interview, the infamous white dress, the constant insistence that only she suffered, it all cemented her unspoken exile. TLC made it clear she would not be coming back. Even her most loyal defenders stopped seeing her as a victim. Instead, she became a cautionary tale. And Kody? He was a ghost of the man who once orchestrated every family gathering. No more interviews. No more confessionals. The man who once couldn't resist a camera now avoided them entirely. Paparazzi caught him only once, gaunt, alone, ringless at a gas station in Flagstaff. He said nothing, climbed into his truck, and drove away. Life moved on without him. The final scene of Freedom Season 1 showed Janelle, Christine, and their adult daughters standing beneath a wildflower arch at Tata Farms. It wasn't staged, it wasn't a reunion, it wasn't performance, it was real. Christine raised a glass of iced tea and laughed, to leaving quietly and returning loudly. The camera pulled upward, soaring into the North Carolina sky, vast, expansive, limitless. The new chapter wasn't on the horizon. It was already here. From that moment, fans began speculating about new ventures. Could my sister wife's closet return? Not as jewelry, but as something more? On a TikTok live, Christine teased, "What if we overhauled it? Not jewelry, but healing kits, affirmation cards, crystals, journals, maybe even teas." Janelle suggested a holistic lifestyle brand. "It won't be about polygamy anymore," she said. "It will be about empowerment, helping women find their voice, whether they're in a marriage, out of one, or just rediscovering themselves." Gwen volunteered to run social media. Logan drafted a business plan. Even Aurora, one of Robyn's daughters who had quietly built a life outside the family drama, offered to help with graphic design. It was subtle but redemptive, the next generation, proving the Brown name could mean something new. Mary, too, explored fresh paths. After the infamous catfish scandal and years of loneliness, she began dating again, but this time, privately. She joined exclusive matchmaking groups and online forums for women leaving long-term spiritual entanglements. When asked about Kody's suggestion that he might find her a husband and a spoof, Mary just smiled. "I don't require Kody playing Cupid." Fans loved the idea of her spin-off, tentatively titled Mary's Way, starting over at 50. TLC even pitched it as a hybrid travel, dating, and journaling show. Mary visiting small towns, meeting people through coffee chats, volunteering, and reflecting on her journey. Not spectacle, discovery, quiet bravery. All the while, Kody's absence loomed large. The women soared emotionally, professionally, and publicly, while he simply disappeared from the spotlight. In interviews, Christine would say, Kody is part of our story, but he's not the whole story. Janelle added, "We have too much life left to live to keep waiting for closure from someone who won't give it." That became the ethos of the post-Sister Wives world, forward motion. Their real estate company flourished under the name Solstice Realty Group, Rebirth After Darkness. They specialized in helping women, especially those escaping controlling relationships or high-demand religions, secure their first homes. Tata Farms became so popular that weddings were booked 6 months out. Mary's retreats sold out. Gwen and Logan's podcast entered syndication on major platforms. And then came the biggest surprise of all. TLC announced the franchise wasn't canceled. It was transformed. A new series, The Reclaimed Wives, was in production. Not a reboot, but a reckoning. A celebration. No more waiting for Kody's approval. No more tears and confessionals begging for recognition. This was about the women picking themselves. Christine, Janelle, and Mary now built businesses, forged new relationships with their children, and explored life on their own terms. They were no longer survivors of a broken system. They were architects of a better one. Kody and Robyn, in their home filled with cowboy pictures, bows, arrows, and symbols of struggle, remained stuck in a narrative of defense, survival, and fading pride. But the others embraced growth, connection, and transformation. While Kody clung to metaphors of toughness and control, Christine, Janelle, and Mary constructed futures of hope, healing, and independence. The Browns may never be whole again, but perhaps they were never meant to be. Maybe the true legacy of Sister Wives isn't about holding a family together. It's about what happens when people finally allow themselves to drift apart and thrive. After more than a decade on television, the saga of the Browns has become more than a story of polygamy. It is now a portrait of human reinvention, resilience, and above all, hope. And as TLC closed one chapter and opened another, fans realized something undeniable. This wasn't the end of the Browns. It was the beginning of a new story.